Hello everyone. Just when they thought the storm had passed, the past began to stir again. The investigation into Trang's father had begun. A quiet whisper of justice that slowly grew louder, unraveling secrets long buried. And with that truth came another question, heavier than the rest. Will Trang return? She had vanished the moment the truth began to surface, but silence does not always mean surrender. Sometimes it means something is being planned in the shadows. James remains calm on the surface, but to Diep can sense it, the tension in his eyes, the quiet way he locks the doors at night. They've come so far, fought so much to be together, but danger has a way of creeping in when love is at its most vulnerable. Are they truly safe now, or is this only the beginning of something darker? Because when betrayal runs deep, it doesn't always end with the truth. Sometimes it returns for one final blow. The rain had been falling all night outside the quiet countryside home. The wind rattled the windows, but inside, there was only stillness. Diep sat by the kitchen table, peeling sweet potatoes, her hands moving slowly, distractedly. She looked up every time a car passed in the distance, hoping it was James returning. It wasn't. In the city, James stood by the glass window of a hotel room, his phone clenched tightly in his palm. He had just left another secret meeting with investigators, handing over files, voice recordings, and bank statements that traced back to one name, Trang's father. He hadn't wanted this, not really. There had been a time when Trang was more than just a business associate's daughter. She was someone he trusted, someone whose presence had once felt like peace after a long storm. But now, everything had changed. James knew that exposing Trang's father, one of the most influential figures in the agricultural import network, meant stirring up something bigger than just corporate rivalry. It meant touching the legacy of an entire family. And yet, he did it because silence would make him just as guilty. But what James hadn't expected was Trang's return. It happened quietly. One morning, Diep opened the front gate to gather fresh herbs and found a black car parked near the road. From it stepped Trang, dressed not in luxury, but in a simple gray coat. She looked tired, older somehow. Her eyes scanned the farm, resting on the small garden Diep had worked so hard to build. "You're too deep," she said, not as a question, but as a statement filled with quiet tension. Diep nodded, unsure whether to smile or stand her ground. Trang exhaled slowly. "I came to see James. He's not here," Diep replied. "He's meeting with the lawyers." "I know." Trang looked away. "He's preparing for the trial against my father." There was silence between them, heavy. Neither woman moved. Diep finally spoke. "Are you here to stop him?" Trang's eyes flashed with pain. "No, I'm here to tell him he was right." Those words stunned the air between them, and just as quickly, Trang turned, walking toward the garden gate as though even the act of standing there was unbearable. Later that night, when James returned, he found Diep waiting under the porch light. She came. Diep whispered. James stiffened. "Trang, she said you were right. She didn't deny anything. She just looked broken." James closed his eyes. A strange ache settled in his chest. Not guilt, exactly, but sorrow for what was lost, for what the truth had shattered. He sat beside Diep, pulling her close. "I was afraid she'd come back angry." "She didn't," Diep said. "But James, are we safe now?" James didn't answer immediately. His hand reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside were new documents, threats, messages, names of others tied to Trang's father. Powerful men who didn't want the investigation to move forward. "They know where we live," James said quietly. "They know you." To Diep's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. "Then we don't hide." James looked at her, this girl who once sold bananas at the market, who now stood beside him in a storm far bigger than either of them had imagined. Her bravery humbled him. "I won't let anything happen to you," he said. "I know," she replied. "But promise me something, James, anything, no matter how dark it gets. Don't give up on justice. If you give in now, then all of this, all the pain, all the truth, it will be for nothing." James reached for her hand. "I won't." Outside, the rain began again, softer this time, like the calm after a war. Somewhere in the shadows, forces were still moving, men with money, secrets and reasons to stay hidden. But James and Diep had made their choice. And Trang, she disappeared again, not into anger or revenge, but into silence. Maybe she was trying to protect what remained of her family. Maybe she was just trying to breathe. But somewhere deep inside, she knew you can love someone and still let them fall. You can grieve a father and still demand justice. And in that quiet space between love and truth, that's where the future begins. The next few days passed like uneasy silence before a thunderstorm, though the skies above the countryside remained blue. James knew it was only a matter of time before the storm hit. The evidence he had provided to the authorities was damning. Detailed financial trails, recordings of meetings where land deals were manipulated, and confidential reports about fertilizer imports, tainted with harmful chemicals, all under the directive of Trang's father, a man long protected by layers of power and political influence. At night, James and Diep no longer slept easily. The soft rustle of leaves outside became a signal to check the windows. A call from an unknown number made James glance over his shoulder. Once, they returned from the market to find the gate unlatched and muddy footprints by the back door. Nothing was stolen, but the message was clear. "They want to scare us," James said, pacing the living room. "They want us to stop pushing forward." To Diep, standing by the window with her arms crossed tightly across her chest, whispered, "They're not just threatening you anymore. I can feel it. I saw a man following me from the bus station." James felt a cold fury rise in his chest. He grabbed his phone, made a call, and by nightfall, a trusted security officer named Quang had arrived. Quang didn't speak much, but his eyes missed nothing. He began sweeping their property, checking cameras, strengthening locks. Meanwhile, the case gained quiet momentum in the city. Whispers about Trang's father filled meeting rooms and court corridors. Many of his former allies began to pull away, fearing exposure. Others tried to silence James with offers of money or favors, but James refused. One evening, just as the sun dipped behind the hills, James received an envelope. There was no name, no address, just a red seal. Inside were two photos, one of Diep, walking alone in the market, the other of her sleeping on their porch unaware. Beneath the photos, a handwritten note, "Drop the case or lose her." James stared at the paper, his jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. He didn't show the photos to Diep, not yet. Not until he had a plan. Later that night, as Diep sat on the porch, peeling a mango and humming quietly, James stepped out and sat beside her. He didn't speak at first. He simply watched her, memorizing every detail: her calm, her strength, the way she looked up at the stars as if they still had answers. "Diep," he said gently, "if anything happens to me." She shook her head, cutting him off. Don't say that. We have to be ready. You have to be ready." "I am," she said. "But don't you dare leave me out of this fight." He smiled, and despite the fear pressing on both their hearts, they leaned into each other, sharing a moment of stolen peace. And then, as if fate had grown impatient, the peace shattered. 3 nights later, a fire broke out in James's old office building in the city. It was arson. All files were destroyed, except for the copies James had already delivered to the lawyers and one hidden drive he had kept. In the countryside, the message was louder now. That same morning, a black car pulled up outside their home, and from it stepped Trang. Her hair was pulled back. Her clothes were simple, her face pale but composed. She walked to the gate without hesitation, looked straight at James, and said, "We need to talk." Inside, the tension was sharp. Diep stood nearby, arms crossed, as James poured tea for their guest. Trang didn't touch it. "My father is going to flee the country," she said. "He has contacts arranging a boat." Tonight, James remained silent. "I came to tell you because I know you won't back down," Trang continued. "And maybe I don't want to protect him anymore." Diep stepped forward. "Why now?" Trang looked at her, and for the first time, her voice cracked. "Because I finally understand. You don't protect someone by helping them hide. You protect them by helping them face the truth." James picked up his phone. "No," Trang said. "Let me go with you." James stared at her for a long moment, searching her eyes for lies. He found only pain and a fragile kind of courage. That night, they drove to the docks together. A storm was building over the sea, and under the cover of darkness, as men loaded crates onto a hidden boat, James and Kwang moved in, silent and swift. Trang's father never saw it coming. It ended with shouting, flashing lights, a man in handcuffs, a daughter watching from behind a veil of tears. Back home, James and Diep sat by the window, side by side, as the rain finally began to fall. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The danger was not entirely gone. There would be more trials, more enemies, but for the first time in a long time, the path ahead was clear. Justice had begun, and they were still standing together. The lesson: when truth demands courage in life, the hardest decisions are not always between right and wrong, but between what is right and what is deeply personal. James to Diep and Trang each faced a moment when truth demanded more than words. It demanded sacrifice, courage, and the willingness to let go of what they once believed was unshakable.